Your name is Tim Finn, and my name is Phil Manzanera. I'm going to take these head. When did we first meet?
We met in Australia in 1975. Roxy Music were touring Australia, and you were one of our favourite bands ever since the first album, the first Roxy album. In fact, you and David Bowie with Hunky Dory and a few other things, but hardly anything, were sort of the only things we liked in the whole world for a while. And so we went off to Australia as Split Ends, and we were given some good supports because of Michael Gudinski, who sadly passed away recently. He was the managing director of Mushroom Records and a bit of a maverick, and he signed us on first sight. And he was very powerful at the time because he had Skyhooks, who were like the biggest band in Australia. So he could pretty much do anything he wanted. So he got us on the support for lots of great big acts, including you guys. And so we were very excited because we were going to be playing with Roxy Music. And we didn't realize until afterwards that you'd watched us, because you'd seen us during the afternoon on a program called GTK, which was an Australian ABC program, national broadcaster in Australia, and they used to film bands playing live. So you'd seen us playing live, and I think it was pretty good. I think we did a pretty good job, and we must have been good because you watched us from side stage. We only found out afterwards, and we had to head off back down to Melbourne, and we found out only a few days later, I think, that you had said something to Michael probably, that you'd like to, work with the band and produce us if we ever came to England. And so we were beside ourselves, because naively, I suppose, I thought that every Roxy Music fan would rush out and buy a Split Ends album. It just seemed to me like,
Obvious.
Yeah. And it doesn't work like that, but it doesn't matter because it gave us a huge momentum. And then Michael paid for us to come over eventually. And we met in London. Yeah. We met properly in London in 1976.
That's right. Well, my version of the story is it's 1975 and it's the beginning of April, and we're very excited because we're all going to Australia for the first Roxy Music tour and also first time to Oz. And so we arrived there after this horrendously long journey via Mumbai and all sorts of stopovers. And I can't remember, it's the longest journey I've ever done in my life, probably about 22 hours. And so I get into my hotel room, I close the door, collapse on the bed, turn on the telly, and there you are playing. And I thought, hang on, this is not what I expected. In Australia, talk about typical, attitude of Brits. I said, what? What the Jesus, who are these guys? So I was absolutely blown away. And then when I found out you were playing with us at the Hordern Pavilion, and I think it was the 15th of April, I thought, right, yeah, I watched it from the side of the stage. My recollection is that when you came off, I passed by your dressing room, popped my head in and said, hey guys, that was terrific. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know, and walked on. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. It's a hell of a long way and an incredible sort of adventure to come to London to record. You'd already recorded the album once, and to come to London. And if you remember, I found the rehearsal tape that I'd taped on a cassette from Brewery Road when you were rehearsing for the recording at Basing Street. And it was incredibly good.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm surprised, but it
was amazing. The first 6 months or so, because you were so well connected there with all different kinds of people and different worlds that we'd never kind of rubbed up against, fashion, photography, music, art. And it was just really an interesting time. And you used to take us, we'd go to that club. What was that club called? Like a bar kind of club. It was a real scene in London.
Yeah.
It was really an interesting time. And it was just before punk came. So I remember you saying to us, Tim, you said you could drive a truck through. There's a hole here, a gap here for you that you could drive a truck through. And there was. And, we were embraced wholeheartedly, not just by people sort of who love music or know about music, but the magazine, the very cynical, hardcore English rock magazines absolutely loved us too. And so it was just a golden ride for the first 6 months or so. And then punk sort of changed everything for everyone, really. And it became very, very tribal. I always remember the St. Martin's College of Art show where everyone came, like all the early punks were there as well as fashion people and students and whoever. And there was this argument going on afterwards between these punks. As we left the building, they were still there arguing about whether they could follow us or not, because they said, well, they're not punk. And then one of them would go, yeah, but they're fucking brilliant. And another one would go, yeah, but they're not punk, are they? And it was so, it was very kind of hardcore, and that was England at the time. I mean, it's nothing like that now. I know that, just even from over here. No. People can like Taylor Swift, they can like Metallica, they can like, anything. Yeah. But in those days, very, very tribal. And that sort of hurt us in a way. There's no two ways about it. We were seen as an art rock band, whatever that is. I mean, all the best songwriters went to art school. I mean, John Lennon, Ray Davies, Pete Townsend, or you name it.
Absolutely. No, I mean, the Beatles really invented art rock with Sgt. Pepper and prog rock, and quite frankly, heavy metal. I mean, they'd all done it by 68, Yeah,
exactly. Anyway, it was an amazing time, and we did a lot of touring up and down the M1, and then we went to America, and things went on from there. But that first recording session with you, Phil, at Basing Street, I'll never forget it, because we were so kind of excited to be in London, and we just thought, because we re-recorded a lot of our first album, we thought it just has to be better if we do it in London with Phil Manzanera producing, so off we went, and it was better, but it was still a kind of a curious thing to do in a way.
Well, so it was different. I mean, some people always, say one thing's better or not, but it was different, and it was great. And I think you had some songs you hadn't done on Mental Notes, and I just looked at the cover the other day, and it's got obviously Rhett Davis was the engineer, who's still working with Brian Ferry, and he'd subsequently worked on all the Eno stuff and Talking Heads and B-52s, and so he was a real gem for us to have as an engineer, and is now engineer producer and stuff. And that studio at that time, that's where Bob Marley recorded the great albums and stuff like that. He was around there the whole time. So Free and just so many bands. That studio. So that sort of studio doesn't really exist anymore now. I think they're tearing it down to build a block of flats.
All right. Yeah, that'd be right. I remember, Phil, we were all quite we were sort of smoking a fair bit in those days, and we had some. All you could get in London was hash. You couldn't actually get any grass, any pot, whatever they call it. So, and I remember you said to me, "Well, we're going to do a little experiment, and we're going to, want you to try the vocal before you have a smoke, and then have a smoke and try the vocal. That you were testing to see which was better." And you definitely went for the one where I'd had the smoke.
Really? That's weird, because I could never smoke because it just sends me to sleep. But I must, with the number of people who were toking around me all the time, I probably, probably was high, but I didn't realize it. Very kindly came and sang on my album called Casco. Yeah. Just before you went back to New Zealand.
Happy to do that. Yeah, that was great. Because no one else was asking us to come and sing on anything. It was a pretty unusual experience to get to be asked.
That was actually in the sort of underneath the sitting room of Chris Squire, his studio, the basement of Chris Squire, who sadly is no longer with us, from Yes. So there's amazing sort of musician connections, and some of the lyrics you sang were by Ian MacDonald, who was Bill McCormick's brother, the bass player. But Ian MacDonald, sadly is dead as well. But he wrote a very famous book called Revolution in the Head about the Beatles, which is always quoted even to this day, and all journalists absolutely adore him. And he was the assistant editor of the NME.
Ah, right. Yeah, no, I remember him. And I'll tell you who else heard that album, Phil, was Ray Davies, because when we went to America in 1976 for the first time, I got out of an elevator I got into an elevator in Los Angeles at the Sunset Marquee, and there was Ray Davies, and I was thinking, God, there's Ray Davies, and he turned to me and said, he held out his hand to shake my hand. He said, "Hi, I'm Ray Davies. I'm a fan," which was the whole universe.
Wow.
The whole universe kind of flipped for me at that point. It was an amazing moment.